message is going to be a little bit tough for some people. It's going to be tough for all of us, but for some people, particularly tough. Aren't you glad you came to church this morning? Aren't you glad you came and hung out? Now, you know that when God wants to say something a little bit tough to us, there's something that we do. Can anyone remember what it is that we do? Come on, Wendy, keep going. Do, 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 do. Oh, that's the way, I like it, That's the way, I like it, What's it about? It's about saying, well, it might be a bit tough, but I should be open to hear God speak some tough things to me too. So if we were flying a plane right now, and I was the captain, I would be saying to you, brace for impact. No, I'm just playing with you. This is a great series. It's a series called Everyone Plays. And you may not realize it, but you are a perfect 10 somewhere. You are a perfect 10 somewhere. You might get up and look in the mirror and go, I don't look like a perfect 10. I don't feel like a perfect 10. In fact, I don't even know where 10 is. But you are a perfect 10 somewhere. Now, however, that also means there is a place when you're a minus 10. It means a place where you are out of your position. But there's a place where you are at your best. And when you're in that place, it's marvelous. Because, you know what, we get to see God moving in you. But if you're out of your place, you're not in your 10 place, you tend to feel a little stressed. You tend to feel a little anxious. You tend to feel a little about what you're doing. And then, of course, when we're watching it, what happens to us? We start getting stressed and we start getting anxious and worried for you because we realize you're not quite where you should be. You know, you're kind of down in the minus 10. You probably want to switch lanes. So you've got to find that perfect 10 lane for you. If you want to see someone in their perfect 10 lane, go and catch up with Lindsay Ertver sometime. And I'm telling you, you won't be there 5 seconds and she'll be talking to you about your weight and she'll be talking to you about your health and about your nutrition. And if she's not doing that, she'll want to say, you need to dance. We can do aerobics. We can do Fondolates. We can do this. She makes these moves up in her head. She would do it for herself. And sometimes there's only her and one other in the room. And I go, don't you feel bad there's only one? No, I do it just for me. She's right in her sweet spot in there. And she has made it her mission in life to stop Wendy and Ruth from giving me chocolate. Because as fast as she's trying to get the weight off, they're putting it back on. Some of you know me a little bit too well. So there's a lane, there's a place. If you get in that place, it is so good. Our musicians, when they're playing and they're singing and the production and we're worshiping God, when they're in their place, it's so good and they're so comfortable that we feel comfortable, and then you step in and then you feel comfortable to worship because they're comfortable. If the worship leader's not comfortable, we ain't going nowhere. So there's that 10. To help you understand this, I actually found a little bit of a band playing. And let me show you someone that's not in their 10 position. Just have a little bit of a look at this, and you'll get a real clear appreciation of it. Get ready for the solo to start. Look at the face of the keyboard player. He's just down. He's not going anywhere. What the heck is going on here? He's holding it together. The guy over there can't do anything but look forward. What is going on? Surely this guy's going to get in the right key in a minute. Guess who's not a 10? Guess who's in the minus 10 in there? You know the scary part is, that goes on for like nearly 2 minutes. He doesn't know he's out of tune. He doesn't know he's in the wrong key. He doesn't have a clue. He's up there, he goes, man, you are in the wrong lane. You know, you need to get in the plus 10 lane, not the minus 10. But I'll tell you what, those other two guys, they are so good. If you go and watch the whole clip, by the end of it, they never flinch. They never flinch, they never shift. And by the end of that clip, you're going, gee, I guess that's how it was planned. It was a bit unusual, but gee, they did a good job. They're in their plus lane, It's amazing. Everybody plays. Everybody's got a place where you're a perfect 10. You've got to make sure you get inside the lane. We're not talking about God's will for your life. That's for us all to be holy. He wants us all 10 on that. His call is for us to be conformed to the image of Christ, follow Jesus and make disciples. We've all got to be a 10 on that. But you've got to work out, how are you going to do that? Which lane are you going to run in? Because you are perfect in one place. And I want to tell you, when you find your place, when you find that place for your sake, for our sake and for God's sake, stay there, please. Don't go outside of that lane. Stay there, because when you're there, it is so wonderful. And this is not just in relation to gifts. This happens in families too. If you're not comfortable in your own skin and you're not sure who you are and what's going on, everybody gets real twitchy. So you've got to know where that space is and head there. I think the funniest thing I have ever heard was when Phil was teaching a few weeks back. Phil's one of our elders, and he happened to be talking about the fact of how our church is different. We talk about the priesthood of all believers, and we actually do it. We're not operating on the old model of Moses, which is the top down, where Moses is the kingpin, and then there's these other commanders that do this and there's that. That's the old covenant model for the nation of Israel. But we've moved to the priesthood of all believers with the fivefold ministry, the apostle, prophet, evangelist, shepherd, teacher. They're not controlling this way, they're doing this. And they're releasing and they're empowering, because it is the saints that are to do the work of the ministry. The pastor's not to do the work of the ministry. The pastor is to train up the saints to do the work of the ministry. So we're releasing all the time. And we're continually releasing you guys to step in and do some assignments to love and care for others, to make sure we're staying on the journey of being conformed to the image of Christ. But Phil has really found his niche. I started training Phil up and do some weddings and do some funerals. He loves it. They love it. But I have never had anybody preaching from the platform suggesting to you that perhaps you should die and keep in mind him to do the funeral. I've never seen it. But why does he do that? Because he's finding his unique lane. And he's in that lane. The guys in the junction, they're awesome. Man, you come here at night time, you see Nick Harvey making the food out there. It's beautiful to watch what he does and how he's in his lane, he's in his passion. It's just great. And Beth and Chris, they're doing their coffees. Anita should never be out there. Anita is an exceptionally gifted girl. Exceptionally gifted, but don't ever, if she says, can I make you a cup of coffee, you come to the office, you pass on that every time. Serious. She can destroy an instant coffee, and she knows it. But she's okay with it. She knows it. She goes in our house, would you like a coffee? And we go, And she's good, we're all good, because she's staying in her lane. So we've got to run our race as well. Know what you're good at, know what you're comfortable at. Have you ever been to a place where someone wants to make you a meal and you look at the plate and you go, dear Jesus, how am I going to get this down? Someone that's got a passion, but you've got to have some skill. You've got to have some ability to go with it. I'm guessing probably not many of you have been to our place for dinner. Once again, we're being real here. Anne knows her limitations. She knows her gift. She knows her gift. She will default to Chris in the kitchen every single time. But if you want to know how to get to a concert, she's your girl. I said to you, you should set up a ticket tech here at the junction, because you go to so many and everyone, can I come to the conference? Can I come with you? So you've got to run your race, but you've got to find it. And there's a simple process to actually finding that lane that's right for you. It's simple, but it's not easy. Here's the first thing. When God has the first place, He helps me find my place. When God has the first place. When we did the 3 circles last week, it's about putting Christ at the center. And when Christ is at the center, the first place, now you start to be prepared to discover your place, your lane. It's really important. He's got to have the first place, because what is first in your life determines what is next. So if Christ is first, He'll make sure you make the next step right. You'll be moving towards your lane. If you have something else first, It's called an idol. And you can make an idol, this is where it gets tough, you can make an idol out of your family, you can make an idol out of your kids, you can make an idol out of your sport, you can make an idol out of your career. If you have something else in first, your next step is going to be wrong. Because that first is going to lead you further and further away from Christ. It's like, oh, well, we really got to do the sport thing, this, that, and the other. Okay, well, we can't be there in this one. And then the next thing is, I got to go to this thing, and then I got to do that thing. And then you realize your kids are a million miles away from God. They're great at sport. They're fantastic at sport, but they're out here. See, first place has to be Christ. And I'm not beating anyone up with sport or anything like that. You've got to figure this out. Because there's no point in creating champions if your kids end up missing Christ altogether. So you've got to figure out how to get that first. Because if Christ is in first place, he'll get you to the right next place. He'll get you to your lane. When you start asking questions like, who am I? What am I supposed to do? What's my gifts? What's my talents? They're great questions, but only after Christ is in the first place. It's why Jesus said to people, he said, seek first the kingdom of heaven and his righteousness, and all this other stuff will be added to you. You've got to get him in first place, because when he's in first place, he'll help you get to your right place, which is your correct lane. Marco has already this morning just showed you how to do that. He showed you how to do that, spending time in God's word with God's people under the inspiration of God's Spirit. That's what actually positions you to get to your right lane. It's about inviting Jesus to rebirth every area of your life so that what's next is coming out of who is first. You can see this in David's life. David was referred to as a man after God's own heart. If you don't know who David was, he was a little shepherd boy, became a king, and did lots of wonderful things, did lots of bad things too, but he did lots of great things as well. But set the context for you. Israel has come from a family out of Abraham that's now turning into a nation. They are living amongst pagan nations, which probably came out of the lineage of Cain. These were barbaric nations. I mean, they did child sacrifice. They would use women in most derogatory ways and then kill them. They would chop the heads off any people passing by and stack them up in piles to make sure you didn't come into their territory. They were barbaric, and God had tried to deal with them for hundreds of years. And in the end, that's not working, so he raises up Israel to be a military nation to go sort this lot out. In the process here, suddenly, Israel decides, we want a king. All the pagan nations are going to king, we want a king. God says, no, I'm your king. No, we want a king. We want a king. I want a king. So we want a king like everybody else. We want to be like everybody else. So he gives him a king. He said, but I'm going to tell you this, it's not going to go well with King Saul, but you can have the king, and it goes badly. But then after all that finishes, he says, now I'm going to show you a king that I'm going to raise up. And so David comes up through. That's a very brief view of the whole thing. So anyway, God says, I've got a king out there prepared. And he sends this guy, Samuel the prophet, down. He said, go down to Jesse's house. And down in Jesse's house, one of those sons there is the king that I have chosen. So this is interesting. So he makes his way down. I'll just read the first verse, and that'll give you a bit of context here. It says, Samuel went down and he saw Eliab, who looks remarkably like Chris Hemsworth. I took that from his Facebook page. He saw Eliab and said, surely the Lord's anointed stands before the Lord. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not consider his appearance or height, for I have rejected him. Oh, right. So Samuel thought for sure, this is the king. This is the one. Anyway, not to be. So then he says, okay, well, let's bring the other 7 sons in, and they're walking through, and nope. Anyway, it's getting down to 6, and I bet Samuel's going, this is not real good. I'm supposed to be the prophet here, and I can't identify who the king is. So anyway, because the number 7 comes in, he goes, oh, okay, this is it. This is going to be it? Nope. So that's a little bit awkward now between Jesse, the dad, and the prophet. So I'm sure Samuel would have said, like, don't suppose you maybe got another son around somewhere? And Jesse would have gone, no, that's my 7 sons. Oh, hang on, wait a minute. Yeah, there is one. I forgot one, the one. He's the youngest one. He's out there shepherding the sheep, but you don't want him. He's the youngest. You don't want him. You go, well, you better bring him in. So he gets brought in. And I can imagine this is going to be awkward. There's the 7 sons, all been rejected as king. David comes in. Huge vote of no confidence from Dad. Thanks, Dad. Forget about me, did you? Then he comes in and goes, this is the one. This is the one that I have chosen. This is a man after my own heart. Wow. What a way to start. What a way to start. Even Dad didn't even consider you worthy to come in the lineup as a son. But here's the deal. Because David had learned to put God in first place. In his early life, in his shepherding, God made sure David made it to his right place. He made it to his right place. And it wasn't going to be about just tending sheep. He would eventually be the king. See, when you put Christ in the first place, when he's in the first place, he'll make sure he gets you to the right place. Now, some of us think we're in our right place. But I can tell you, we're not. Because if we were all in our right place, there would be so much stuff going on around here, and the Lord would be adding to his family, to the church daily. We'd be seeing all sorts of things going on. So I know that not everybody is operating in their right place. But we've got to get to operating in our right place. But you put Christ first, you don't have to worry about a promotion. He'll make sure you get the promotion, the one that you need to get. You don't have to worry about being seen. He'll make sure you get seen. You don't have to worry about your gifts and talents. He's put them there. He'll make sure they get deployed in the right area. That's why Paul says it's God who works in you to will and to act for his own good pleasure. If you put him first, he aligns your will with his will, your purposes with his purposes, your actions with his actions, because he knows what's best for you. And because you put him first, he knows what's best. He also knows what's next and best. So he continually moves you there. God saw so much more in David than anybody else did. More than his dad, more than his brothers, more than Samuel. I love it when people go through the waters of baptism, and Brandon's going to be going through shortly. These are guys that are standing up and saying, I'm going to identify with Christ. I'm going to publicly identify and say, I will die with Christ that he may live through me. Because I can't do this in my own flesh. I can't work this out in my own flesh. But if I will die, then it'll be spectacular because God can actually work through me and he can position me in the right place. So there's 3 things that you need to know. There's 3 P's to help you actually get into that potential, that right place. And the first thing is potential. You've got to understand. You've got to discover your potential. Most of the church in the West are what I call iceberg Christians. They live in the 10% of the top. We've got this nice little show thing. We've got all the languages. We've got all that kind of thing going on. But we live from up there. We're kind of like the 10% Christians. We judge people's worth by what we see on the top there, what we value. We live in that space. But your potential is down in the 90%. You've got to allow God to go down in there, and you've got to allow him to renew you down in there. He's got to be first in the 90%, not first in the 10%. And you do that by being willing to go below the surface, be willing to allow Christ to rebirth every area of your life that is not fully surrendered to him. And then you start picking up a towel and you're jumping in different lanes and you're trying to figure out as you're going, what is this potential that's in me? Is it to see young people or children to come to faith in Christ? What is it? Is there some kind of gift in there that's emerging? But just down in there, and you've got to be willing to go down in there. And that's the emotionally healthy spirituality. You'll hear us say you can't be emotionally mature while remaining spiritually immature. You've got to deal with the 90% underneath the surface. That is where all your spiritual growth comes from. That's where your personal growth comes from. That's your financial health, your people skills, physical health, vocational abilities. It all comes out of the renewal of that 90% underneath. It's down there that you discover the bigger picture, not the one that you got up here in your head in this 10%, but down in there is potential that you can't even dream of at the moment. Remember, David is shepherding sheep. He's out shepherding sheep. He was probably quite content out there shepherding sheep, enjoying his relationship with God. Nothing more was in his head. Meanwhile, God is looking at below in the 90% and saying, David, I know you like shepherding, but inside you is a mighty warrior. And David would eventually become one of the most fierce, mighty warriors that there was. I know you think you're a shepherd, David, but you know what down inside you? There's something else. You're going to write poems. You're going to write songs that's going to declare my majesty. It's going to change people's lives for thousands and thousands of years. I know you think you're just a shepherd, David, just looking after a group of people. But actually, you're not. Your lane is to be a king. And I'll get you into that place because that's your potential. David didn't see it. Jesse, his father, didn't see it. Samuel the prophet didn't see it. Saul, the previous king, he definitely didn't see it. But God saw it. And David learned something. By putting God in first place, David ended up in the right place. He discovered his potential. He discovered his potential. You've seen those men at work signs they put on the side of the road? And you drive past them, it usually means they're digging a hole somewhere. They're digging a hole, and there's always like 8 of them to do one hole. But they're all in there. But they're digging a hole. You know, I reckon we should all get a T-shirt that says, God at work. God at work, always. To indicate to people, hey, listen, God's doing a deep work in me. He's digging deep. Now, some of us haven't regenerated that 90%. And some of us, you know, when you get cut off in traffic and things like that, things don't go well. We should probably get a T-shirt that says, beware, explosive power tool in use or something like that. I don't know. Because when that comes up, when you see people like that, they haven't found their space. They haven't found their lane, and they're frustrated. And under the surface, it's all there. But you've got to allow God to do that deep, deep work. And he's going to get rid of those obstacles. And I'm so proud of our guys. They're doing their authentic manhood, and they're learning what it means to be a real man. And I'm doing a group, I'm doing with one guy on Friday morning. And kudos to him. I mean, like, we're in the stage, I think it's season 2, where we're dealing with our family of origin, and we're looking back and we'll go forward, and we're trying to process the things that happen to us in families. And we're having the most amazing conversations. And there is so much likeness between his story and my story. And so I've been through this 2 or 3 times, but this time now I'm going through, it's different. It's like God's peeling back something else because of his story and my story are aligning, and that's showing us more of God's story in there. And it's just so, so good. Sadly, I think a lot of the Christians in the West are still functioning under what I call the old covenant thinking. And Paul basically died trying to stop this thinking, and he never got it out of the church. It's like we're 10% Christians. Sometimes I get people come up to me and go, you're not going to believe, Pastor, you're going to be so proud of me. I've started tithing. 10%? How good am I? Well, you're on par with those under the law at the moment. You know, like that's a starting point. But you see, under the old covenant, God said, you give me 10%, I'll bless the 90 left so that you don't end up losing everything. But after the cross, it's all gone. God said, I gave everything for you. My only reasonable response is for you to give everything. But I think, sadly, so many people within Christendom in the West are saying, here's my 10%, God. I'll give you my 10% because I'm a good Bible Christian. But the other 90%, I live that's my life to live however I want to live it. And that's a problem because that's what's robbing the church of its power. That's what's robbing the church of its presence. That's what people look at and go, why doesn't the church look beautiful? Why does it seem so resistible and ugly at times? What's going on? It's because we've got some of that old thinking sitting underneath there, and it tarnishes the good thinking of the new covenant. So I think part of that is God saying, I've got to get down there in that 90%. You've got to let me down there. I know I've come into your life, and I've come into the front door of the temple, but I've got to get throughout all the temple. I got to be down in the 90% as well. And you know what? We fight going down there because we're afraid of what we will find. We're afraid of our failures and our fears. And what will God require of me if I get a little bit too close? But yet down in there, that's how you get to the potential of your lane. That's what releases your passion. Oh, your passion. What are you passionate about? Sorry to use Lindsay again, but go and talk to Lindsay. If you want, 5 seconds and you'll know exactly what she's passionate about. And because she's so comfortable in her skin and she's in her spot, you feel comfortable having those conversations. And it dialogues with you. As I said, Anne's comfortable at concerts and fun and all the rest of that kind of stuff. Get around her. You'll catch it. You can't help but catch it. You just can't help it. Ruth has loved this city. Christmas. Although I did get my tree up first, which I'm secretly quite chuffed about. She's got a passion to reach people that don't know Christ. The junction, everything about it, it just comes out. She wants to see us be effective. My passion is to see the church finally free from the old covenantal law that was bled into it at the start, which today still resides in there. Now, we've worked very hard over this last 10 years where God's changed the wineskin. He's changed all of the systems and the structures and everything like that to bring freedom to us so we don't have that controlling, manipulative thing about how we run the church, but we're actually releasing and empowering for everybody to play. But here's the deal. The next phase is getting down in the 90% personally about our thinking. How's our thinking about things? Do we think like New Covenant, like what Jesus thinks? Tax collect, go sit with the tax collectors and the sinners, and love the unlovely and be with the broken? Or do we have an Israel idea, which is, let's segregate ourselves, let's remain holy, don't let anything impure come into our temple. See, I think you discover, when you go on this journey, you discover in that 90% there's things there that shouldn't be there, that's actually robbing us of our joy and robbing everybody else of you finding your lane and discovering the power that God's got through you. Because when you really fly, everybody is drawn to you because they love not you, they love the fact that when you're really flying, it's like you kind of, even though you're there, it's kind of like you kind of diminish, but Jesus goes up, which is the John the Baptist thing. It's like you can say, man, the presence of God is on this person, and then that draws you. So my passion is to get us free from the shadow of the law, to be finally free as individually as well as a people so that God can add to his church daily. So he can have a people that look very different to the rest of the world, that are carrying love, grace, and truth, and mercy, and passion of Christ everywhere. David's passion was to know God and to obey God. That's what he was about. He was so passionate in his walk that even when he was in an absolute diabolical strait, people still wanted to hang with him. They still wanted to hang with him. He's being chased by Saul. He's trying to stab him to death. He's running all over the place. He's hiding out in a cave, and 400 people turn up to be with him. Why? Because they knew David had something. David had a passion. And even though he was not at the throne yet, his passion for what God wanted him to do was eking out on everybody, and he didn't even have Facebook to tell them, or Instagram or Twitter. He didn't have it. He just got out there. You need to get around David. Why? Because David knows his God and he knows his place. And because he knows his place, I'm comfortable. I want to be in that place. You're good at stuff. The talents and gifts you've got are not there by accident. They're put there by God divinely because they're part of helping you shape your lane, finding your potential, finding your passion. And when that emerges, it's beautiful. But it takes a bit of patience. That's the third thing. So we're such an impatient people. You know, we want to plant a seed in the ground and then pull it up every other day and see, how's it going? What's the matter with this thing? It's just not growing. Well, God, why aren't you doing your work? What the heck is going on here? You've got to plant it in there. And it takes time of faithfully putting God first down in every area. When the Holy Spirit highlights something and says, I need to be first in that area, you got a choice. If I make him first, he'll get me to the right next place. If I choose to not allow him into that area and I keep an idol in that area, that will take me to the next wrong place. This is how we look at ministries and we look at people and we go, how did that happen? How is it that that person is up there preaching, doing all this kind of stuff and doing this thing, and there's people coming to Christ and all this stuff's going on, and then suddenly it comes out, he's got like 5 women on the side, he's embezzling funds. What is that? 10% Christianity. As long as I look good at the top, and as long as I can take the word and throw it out at you, here you go, here's a message for you, and one for you, and one for you. But unless it comes in here and goes deep down and transforms the 90%, you can have all sorts of horrible things going on in there that no one knows about. But God is a good God, and eventually he'll flush that sin out because he has to. Otherwise, it will cause you to miss life in the kingdom. So we have to be patient. There's no such thing as overnight Christianity and instant spiritual maturity. The fruits of the Spirit take time to grow, and you've got to be patient. You've got to be patient and keep putting God first. And over time, God will do the work. He will renew, he will restore, he will align you. He'll help you find your passion and help you find your potential. But it's in putting him first, and eventually you get into your right place. He does the same thing with healing. I can remember as a young man, I think up until this year, I can't recall the time. I'm 57. Am I 57? I can't recall a time where I've experienced not getting up and being in pain. And that goes right back from when I was 6 months old, had a twisted bowel, and then about 1 year in, I had rheumatic fever, and that left all sorts of things. And then I had kidney failure at about 9. Then I had some mystery polio thing that paralyzed me at 15. And so I've lived my entire life just in pain. But this year I've been experiencing some days where it's like I get up and I go, hey, I'm not in pain. But that's a long time to wait. There were days where I didn't want to get out of bed, but I would say, Lord, you've got to help me get out of bed today. And you've got to hang on. Sometimes God will break in and do something spectacular and healing, and I've had those things. Other times he lets something linger for a while to teach you patience, to get you into your right purpose and passion and place. And you've got to be able to say, God, I'm staying put. You've got to be able to be like Job, and he's been in our devotions this last few weeks. How'd you like that? Within about a 15-minute conversation, you lose all of your business opportunities and all your kids die. And yet he says, just Job would not say anything against God. He wouldn't blame God for anything. He chose, I'll worship God. And in the end he goes, his wife wasn't very helpful. She just said, Job's not looking good. Why don't you just curse God and die? Yeah, it's not real good. That's not a good option. He says, even if God were to slay me, I'm still going to worship him. See, that's someone that's saying, I'm going to put God first through all the seasons of life, not just when it looks good. That's what happens in modern day Christianity. When God's doing great things, it's fantastic. As soon as the wheel falls off, they're gone. Why? Because I didn't sign up for that. I signed up to, he's supposed to be like that vending machine. I put the money in and out comes the blessing. It doesn't work like that. But we kind of perpetuated it. But you've got to have that same kind of like heart to say, no, I'm going to stay there. I'm going to put God in his first place, and I'm going to stay there. It took David 20 years to get to the throne. 20 years. It took Moses 40 years after he tried to do it in his own strength. He had to go out in the wilderness for a while to get God sort him out. Don't know much about Jesus until he turns up at 30. Had one little encounter somewhere. So there's a whole lot of time that God is working behind the scenes to get him in his first place. God has to be in the first place if we're to make it into the right place. And here's the second thing about this process. If you get in the right place, you become a safe place. We become a safe place for people. People are drawn to you. They're encouraged by you. They want to be with you because there's something that you've got they don't have, and they experience this life. That's why they're following David in the cave, because they just know there's something there. And so they're wholeheartedly going after him. We have these connections in the junction now, which is just fabulous. People come, they're connecting with themselves, then they connect with each other, and then hopefully they take the opportunity to connect with God. Even on Saturday, a young fella comes in, and I saw him there, and Chris did a great job of just welcoming him, and he gave him a cup of coffee, and I thought, I'll go over and just see what happens. Went over and engaged, said, hey, you go, and he said, oh yeah, I started this business, in my t-shirt business in my room with a mate, and now it's then down in a factory, and we don't know how to run a business, and we're just making t-shirts. We love making t-shirts. So I said, well, that's cool, man. And then I looked across, and this is all about Lindsay today. I looked across, and Lindsay was over. I said, see that girl over there? I said, she owns graffiti. Really? I said, we should meet her, man. So we went from a connection there, across there. Lindsay goes, hey, I've been looking for someone closer by that could do t-shirts because I have to farm it out into different areas. So there's a connection there. But now that connection has taken place, there's an ongoing connection that starts to happen. We've actually served and added value to him first before we've even talked about the spiritual side of his life. But we're earning the right to do that. And that's kind of how it all happens around here now. It's really, really, really cool. Because no one can mend a broken heart like Jesus. No one can stop people from taking their own life. Only Jesus, only him at the center can do that. No one can get us back to God's original design but Jesus. And every single one of us, where you work, where you live, where you go to school, whatever it is that you're doing, you are to be the safe place in that environment for people to be drawn to Christ. And don't think just because you're in primary school or whatever, you're out of the mix. No, you've got to be the safe place for the kids in your class. They need to be able to come. But you won't be a safe place unless you find your right place. And you won't find your right place until Jesus is in the first place. This is all about moving from the new wineskin, the new system structures, to the new wine, which is actually transforming us to be so attractive. You look at David down there in the cave at Adullam, and you see who comes to him. It's like everybody that's in debt, everybody that's distressed, everybody that's just like discontented. How'd you like to plant a church with that? Just give me all the distress, all those of you in debt, all the discontented, bring them all over to me and I'll do something with you. I don't know what I'll do, but I'll do something. They all come to David. Why? Because David was a safe place. And somehow they knew that David knew his God, and that somehow if they hung around him, maybe God might notice them as well. And they end up, these guys, they think they're like minus 10s, and they really were minus 10s. But they became plus 10s. Those mighty men of David's, they were the ones that worked with David, did the most unbelievable feats on a military thing. Unbelievable. Why? Because they found a safe place in David. And people are looking to us all the time for a safe place that they can come in their brokenness and then they can move from there. But it doesn't happen quickly. God's got to go down into that 90%. And if you don't sense that going on, you've got to ask the question, what is going on in me? If the people in your family don't like you, that's a pretty good hint that you're not addressing what's going on underneath the surface of your life. Because Christ is attractive to broken, lost people. Fascinates me. It fascinates me that tax collectors, sinners, prostitutes, everybody loved hanging around Jesus. Now, they don't like the church. Well, hang on. He's supposed to be at the head of it. How can it be that they don't like us, the church, because we don't represent Jesus? Could it be that maybe we've got a little bit of that old covenant thinking still coming through there that Paul died trying to keep out of the mixture? Maybe. That's what we got to do. We got to go on the journey of doing that. These guys went from minus 10s to plus 10s. Took 40 years for them to get to the promised land. How long, if they took a straight line, how long would it have got to get there? Anyone know? 3 days. 3 days. They could have got to the promised land in 3 days, and yet they spent 40 years around in the wilderness, and everybody but Caleb and Joshua died. What was God trying to do in those 40 years? He was trying to deal with the 90% under the surface that they wouldn't let go of because of where they came out of slavery. The attitudes, the positions, God couldn't get control of them. And in the end, he said, you know what? If you're not going to put me first, you could die in the wilderness. But they could have gone there in 3 days. God does stuff. He's very gracious in waiting for us. But eventually, he goes, man, if this is never going to happen, trip cancelled. I'm not going to hang around here forever, even though you have to hang around forever because you're God, But he's looking at it. 4,000 years to get Jesus to us. Why did it take so long? Well, there's stuff that's going on there that we don't understand that he was working out in the background. And you've got to be patient. 20 years for David. Took me 20 years. 20 years in Ipswich. You only get 9 for murder. I want you to know that. I only get 9. 20 years in Ipswich. And to prepare me, to position me, to come down here and rethink church back to the scriptures. And that was a difficult time in that 20 years. Like David's running around getting stabbed. I mean, no one was trying to stab me up there. I want to get that clear. For my pastor, no one was trying to stab me. But there was stuff that was going on me. I was seeing inconsistencies of what we were calling church and what was happening to people, and it was distressing me to the point where I ended up in clinical depression. I had to fight my way out. But you know what? Without going through that, I would never have been positioned to come here and go, you know what? I'm ready for a blank page. Can we start again? Without that, I just come back and say, let's do the same thing all over again. And it's taken another 10 years to reposition us to get rid of the old mind thinking, get rid of that, get rid of those ugly systems and structures to release and empower and get to the new covenant model of the fivefold ministry, equipping, empowering the saints to do the work of the ministry. Incredibly hard, but it's taken 10 years to do that. But now it's like, now we're free. We're free collectively at our church. But I don't think we're all free individually. Because I think some of us have some things that we've still learnt from our families of origin, or maybe we're still carrying on, which was from an old covenantal way of thinking that I think is robbing us of his presence and of his power. And I think that's what God wants to do. And I'm going to ask the team to come back because I want us to worship this morning. A little bit more time of worshiping. I told you it was going to be tough because I know when someone says to me, you need to EHS that, I know exactly what they're saying. They're saying to me, you are operating from a system that has not yet been regenerated. That is not how Christ leads. That is not how Christ behaves. That is not how Christ models for us. And you have to go down there. But you have to do that because that's how we become the safe place. That's how we become the safe place. That's how we get into our right lane because Christ is at the center. He's at the center. You know, how big is our grace? You know, like, I've had 3 things that's happened over the last 2 months that's, okay, right. And feeling very challenged because God says, how big is your grace? How much grace can I extend through you to others? I met this gentleman and we were having a conversation and he was telling me about his daughter and it was fabulous. And I'm going, yeah, you're such a cool guy. You need to come to our church. And I was telling him about the past and he's sharing, yeah, come on over. Anyway, in the middle of it, he just dropped out a name. And I thought, oh, okay, so he knows that person. Because I've heard a lot about our church and, you know, it sounds really awesome. I said, yeah, come on. And anyway, I go out and then I make a phone call. I thought I'd just ring that person. And I'm ringing them and just talking away. He said, yeah, I just met such and such, rah. Yeah. And the phone's going quiet. And I said, heard about their daughter. Awesome daughter, yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, and the phone's gone quiet. And then the little voice goes, did he tell you about his husband? Excuse me, the line went a little bad. Did he tell you about his husband? Whew. I got to go now. And I was rattled. And I think, oh my goodness. Do I have enough grace? Do I have enough grace to sit in here and extend the love of Christ hand out the word of life? Do I have that kind of grace in me? And I've been processing that for a while. And then I met a young lady in a cafe, and I was just getting some advice for cafe. And wonderful young lady. And then she wasn't working behind there this day, and she's out there and she's nursing this little one. I thought, oh, cool. So I said, why aren't you back behind there? And she goes, oh, I'm just here nursing a little one. I said, oh, fantastic. And I'm there, I'm just coddling over this little one. Oh, that's awesome. She goes, yeah, say hello to my wife. Your wife? Yeah. Don't react, stay cool, stay calm. Lovely to meet you. Go back to little ones, that's awesome. And I have to walk away again and go, and I get confronted by the Holy Spirit. Do you have enough grace to allow me to get in close enough that perhaps some might respond to the word of life? I don't know where we're going, church, but I know that for us to be able to move into those kind of spaces, we are going to have God in first place. He's going to have to be 100% over every area of our life if we're to be in the right place to handle that kind of thing. And just when I'm trying to process that, I'm thinking, oh, this is all good. Then Ruthie tells me this week, the multicultural families have asked. They've asked, could they come in and could they use the kitchen, cook stuff and this, that and the other, because we've got this amazing system here in Australia by which we bring them in and they can't get any funding for welfare, but they're also not allowed to work. It's a marvelous system. I don't know how it works, but it's a marvelous system. So they said, well, could we come and we can maybe upgrade the kitchen and maybe they could, because they can really cook. They cook, yes, we can do that, yeah, come on. And then Ruth says, we're having a meeting tomorrow at 4:00. Yes, with a Muslim man. Oh, that's lovely. I have another appointment then, by the way. Same thing. Do we have enough grace? Because down in that 90% is where all our prejudice is. It's where our racism is. It's where the issues is that hinder us from engaging and from doing things. I remember going back, start of the year, there was that horrible atrocity where that mosque was shot up, and there were some very cruel Christian people saying some pretty awful things. And one of our guys came up to me afterwards, and he said, can I talk to you? And I was so proud of him. And he said, I have to be honest with you. He said, I have to be honest, that kind of feelings are in my heart. And he was grappling with them because he said, I know the scripture said our fight is not with flesh and blood, our fight is with our enemy, our spiritual enemy. And he's processing all this. And you know what he said to me? He said, if you ever start a ministry engaging Muslims, would you please include me in there because I need to process this down in my heart. Well, lucky you, they're coming tomorrow. And you're here. You're here. Yeah. Church, Jesus sat with them. He never endorsed their sin, but he loved them. And the broken people loved him. And we've got to allow God to transform that 90%. So he can deal with all this so that we can live with the tension. Because it's going to get worse. It's not going to get better. You're going to confront these situations all the time, and you're going to have to know, how do you hold your position graciously and extend the word of life that some may come to repentance? Paul talks about it in Corinthians. He's talking to a bunch of guys in there, and he goes, I won't tell you the exact thing, but he basically was saying, and some of you were living in lifestyles that were questionable to God. The fact that he says some of you were means that some, through the connection, made the decision to align with Christ. It also meant there must have been one sitting there that hadn't made the decision. Do we have that kind of grace? We're going to have it because you're going to live in this world like that, and your kids are going to have questions, big questions. And you're going to have to disciple them well and let them know everybody has free will before God. Some people choose ways that God does not approve of. We still have to love them. We still have to love them. But we've also got to hold up and say, this is the standard. And this is the tension of the 21st century now that we live in. But we won't be able to do it unless we can allow God to have first place in every area of our life and to rebirth every area in our life so that we can be in that right place where these kind of people are attracted to us. Not because of who we are, but because of who's within us. Because when we're in our spot, it's like we decrease, but Christ increases, and the word of life is held up. Challenging time to live in. I spoke to my senior pastor a little while back, and he said, I could not pastor in this arena that you guys have to pastor. He said, I am so glad I am retired. I said, I'm thinking about it. No, I'm not. I'm not, because you know what? God has called us for such a time as this. If you've been born into this time, it means that you are up for the journey. You wouldn't be here unless you were up for the journey. Our generation is going to have to negotiate what no other generation have had to negotiate. And it's all happening at the same time. But I want to say, we're up for it. We're up for it. Let's stand together and we're going to pray and we're going to worship, because I need to give you a few minutes just to let your heart come back before the Lord. I think we might do Waymaker. Is that all right? I just think we might do Waymaker, because I think God has to do a work down deep in our hearts. He's got to do a work down deep. Father, I just thank you that you are amazing, God. You love us more than we can imagine. And there are some of us, and I know I'm guilty at times, where I'm frightened to go down into that 90% because I have to confront some of the things of my past and some of the stuff that has hurt me and wounded me. And so I don't want to go there, but you've got to get in there as well. So Lord, would you give us the grace to allow you to be first in every area of our life? And Lord, as we sing, would you give us the courage to open up our heart and say, Lord, we will patiently keep putting you first till you identify our passion and our potential, and you show us the lane so that we can become a safe place for the broken people of this world to find their Savior.